Hey, Steve. Hey, Carsten. Hey, Greg. Hope you guys can hear me.
I can, but I think if I'm reading this right, Karsten and Greg are just on text chat.
Okay. Yeah, I wonder how much you get out of the meetings if you don't listen to the audio, but like.
Yeah, because this one doesn't do the transcript that happens in meetings.
I don't think so.
I don't see it flooding with us anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, everyone needs to decide. Okay. We'll take some notes again today. Let's wait a few minutes. Actually, John was so kind to put the link into the mail that he sent out. So
yeah, it's definitely helpful. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, I don't know why Data Tracker makes it so difficult to just sort of schedule a standing meeting, except that I suppose we're not really supposed to have standing meetings. So
probably that's the reason, John.
Yeah.
Don't optimize for a thing you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, I guess so. Hey Neil, hey Dick, and hey Yogesh.
Hey, good evening to you, and good morning to folks
Hey,
from.
Yogesh.
Hello, Hannes. Hello, everyone.
Hey there.
Dick, have you had a chance to work already on the BRF with Ray? I remember that you guys wanted to put a document together and submit it.
Yeah, we haven't actually made any progress on that, Hannes. My apologies. I know that, it's not an excuse, but I will tell you that things are really crazy here in the U.S. right now with the SEC cybersecurity regulations going into effect in December. So there's a really good chance I won't have any time to work on it until after December.
Okay, but I guess that's a good sign. It sounds like the work we are doing is in high demand. So.
Oh, there's no doubt about that in my mind. Especially, we're supposedly 2 weeks from getting the word here in the U.S. about the new cybersecurity trust mark. There's supposed to be regulations put in place by September 30th on that. I don't know. Is Bob Martin here? He might have. No. Okay. I haven't heard any more about it, but I know it's due on September 30th, and that would be a prime candidate, in my opinion, to register a security label in a SCITT registry.
Yeah, lots of exciting development. Hey Charlie. Hey Eduardo.
Hey guys.
Hey. I think.
Hey Dick, what do you think? Dick? How do you think that's going to work? Because I've been looking at that, and it doesn't really seem that related to SCITT. It's just a self-assertion, really, at this point.
So, Charlie, from what I've heard, and I don't have inside information, I just basically hear what I see online. The FCC is supposed to be putting out some guidance on how to make these labels available. I know if you look at Singapore and Finland, you'll see that they don't have a quote registry, if you will. They just have websites where you can go check these labels. But it looks like FCC may be hosting something a little more formal. At least that's my impression.
Challenge to get something like SCITT adopted, given that all of these things are starting to kind of fall to like a least common denominator implementation lately. I think of SBOM in the same way, you know, attestation and so forth. They're all kind of like, okay, you know, scribble something on a cocktail napkin and send it to us and you're okay. So I think we're a ways from having, you know, verified, you know, credentials for the entity, notarization, all those things that we love so much are really not going to be in any of these standards. We may be able to sell them, I think, to participants as a way to rise above the pack, but I don't think we're going to be able to count on the feds to do our job for us here.
Yeah, as I understand it, the concept behind at least the U.S. cybersecurity mark is that you will have a QR code on the box. Let's say you go into Best Buy and you want to check, you know, on this router, there'll be a QR code on the box that enables you to check the trust, you know, for this trust label. Well, that QR code's got to take you someplace, right?
Yeah,
you know,
but that's
where?
You know, manufacturer website or whatever. I think so. I made my point. I don't want to belabor it here, but I think it would be a great application. I just don't think that we're gonna have any requirements for government work or even consumer IoT seals that are you know, that need authentication almost in any way. So just my opinion. Maybe it'll be different, but
well, of course, sort of like it starts somewhere and then there's some progress and things evolve over time, and in general, like regulation doesn't pinpoint or point to a specific standard and you have to do this or that. I think it will sort of sort out, but I see a lot of use cases where something like a SCITT registry would obviously be of great value. Which brings us to the topic of today. John, you have kindly sent out an email to the list pointing out that we haven't really managed to hear back from our presenters from Omnivore.
Yes, correct. So there was a nice conversation going on, but now there isn't. So we don't have the guest presentation. On the upside, that allows us to continue our actual work leading up to 118 of trying to sort out feeds. We have had with a UK national holiday, and then a US national holiday, and then the DBOM presentation last week. We've had quite a few weeks off chasing that progress. So I'm actually quite glad to be back on track.
I think you left your microphone on.
Well, sorry, I was just waiting to jump in the queue, but
Okay, sorry.
Do you want to jump in the queue then, Neil, before we start reviewing PRs?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry. I just wanted to support the notion that the sort of use that Dick is talking about, you know, for asserting compliance with marks is an ideal and hopefully very easy application for either SCITT or for SIGSTOR or for kind of anything that provides an append-only solution, because you know, it's the sort of thing where the relying parties are going to want to know that it was claimed at a certain time and be able to prove that even if somebody takes it off their website because they got something wrong or whatever. You know, it's ideal. So I think we should be making that point, and I think you all know that, but just wanted to chime in with that.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, but John, as you said, and also as you wrote in your email, we'll just postpone the presentation and hopefully we'll hear back from the DBOM or the Omnivore community, so we can then get more insight into what they are actually up to. But till that time, we can have a look at our PRs. We have 2 PRs open, and we have a bunch of open issues. And Steve has also looked into this feed versioning topic, which we also talked about in the past. So we have enough content to talk about. So where do we want to start?
Well, since Steve is here, that's a bonus. Hank's got his hand up. So I think just to make sure we plan our time, the most important thing we have to sort out is the feed ID, which is what we were discussing 3 weeks ago when we were last on our standard agenda. Because if we don't sort out the feed ID at the very least, then we don't have interoperability in the claim envelope or the receipt envelope rather, and that's just a big problem. So that's the thing that I think has to be working by 118. But then again, that's work that I and Ori have been doing, and frankly, I haven't been doing that work, and Ori's not on the call. So we can put that to the back. Steve's here and has some good input. So on versions and versioning, I think we can look at that as a use case for feeds and instructing that. And I did want to pick up one PR that's come into the emulator from John Anderson, adding OIDC as the authentication method for the client, because of course we have to decide whether we're going to build that into Scrappy or make it a kind of optional extension for Scrappy. So those are the 3 things I think on the table for today, beyond the open PRs.
We have currently 2 PRs open. One is an older PR that I filed on one specific section, and then I think it was Cedric who then picked up another comment I posted as a review about the RFC 2119 language, the must, may, should, and worked on that as well. So we have those 2. I suspect, since we both use the same branches, we will have tons of merge conflicts, but we can at least talk about the content.
Yeah, so let's get those done first and then do the new content after that, so that we can keep moving forward.
So Hannes, can you share this so that it is easy for people to understand in the group?
Sure. Give me a stop. Well, then I can't take meeting minutes at the same time. Can someone else share?
I can share it if you want. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't do meeting minutes and because it's a different window.
Yeah, give me.
So maybe I can give an update on these 2 pull requests that are still in preparation. So there are 2 of them. There is one on terminology, but we got stuck on the very first term last time. So I need more time. And I plan to report on that in the editors meeting tomorrow, but that's still not something that is ready. I'm just starting there. Then on the use of RFC terminology, in particular should, Antoine is preparing the pull request for that. But similarly, I think on the first or second instance of should, we got into a very detailed discussion about what we wanted to do. And so it's also going quite slowly, and that's also something we are planning to discuss tomorrow in the editors meeting. So for both, I'm not sure we are ready to have a good discussion today.
Well, we have 2 PRs that we can definitely look into, and Yogesh is just showing them up on the screen, so we can talk about those. It's great that you guys are working on new PRs because of the upcoming meeting. For what it's worth, actually, I should remind you that today is the early bird submission deadline. So in case you want to participate at the next IETF meeting in what form you like, if today is the time to get the cheapest deal. I will send a Yogesh. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just.
It's a little messy. Yeah. No.
Sorry, I just had a.
Yeah, we can see the chat window, and that's obviously creates these weird artifacts. That's
Okay,
that.
I got it. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Excellent. Excellent. Okay.
So, which one are we discussing? The proposal for section 6 is from you, Hannes?
Yeah, that's the oldest one. Should we start with that one first? And what I was trying to accomplish, I tried to keep it brief. It has been out there. Thankfully, Yogesh, you've provided a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. So what I was trying to do is sort of reading through the whole document. I tried to organize it a little bit more and address my own comments that I posted to the list. One of them was like I got rid of the envelope.
Hannes, sorry to interrupt. Do you want to share the link?
Oh, sure.
I'm sharing the screen.
But I can also post a link.
Yeah, that works either as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got it.
1 second. Okay. So this is the yeah. So and then worked on the text a little bit. As you can see. So what I was also trying to do is try to organize sort of more clearly according to like the steps that happen. Like in this case, we are seeing the issuing of the signed statements, starting with that one and then sort of go step by step from that. And reshuffle the text. That's why it looks a little bit like I did a lot of rewrite, but actually I was moving stuff around. Maybe
One
shortening.
question,
Yeah.
Hannes, one question here. Is it actually issuing signed statement or it is actually explaining what signed statement format is? Because the line 642 on the older version had an explicit statement about signed statement format, and you are saying issuing signed statement. So are you talking about issuing it, or are you talking about its format, which is part of the signed statement?
Well, if you before you can use the API that is described in this other document, in the Scrappy document, you have to, the issuer has to take all the different claims and munch it together and then produce a signed statement and has to get it ready for making the API call. This is the text for that.
Okay, maybe the title is a bit, I feel.
Yeah, you can always improve.
Okay.
But I think it's yeah, step by
Okay.
step. Okay, let's
Sure.
go to the next section. Yeah, so I mentioned that already with the CDDL. Not a big deal, just a formality. There's the list that you just browsed over, the list of technologies that the SBOMs that could go into. I think, Yogesh, you actually owe us still some references in here.
Yeah. Okay. I will
so
do it right away. Today I plan to do it. Actually, I realized this gone slipped my list. So
radar.
today you will see appear. Yes, slipped
Cool.
my radar.
Yeah.
So, but you want me to kind of this one let it merge this one and then do that, or add it to
That
your
would
pull
be good
request?
because otherwise
Yeah.
we have more merge conflicts. Yeah.
So let your PR merge and then I will add the references.
Actually, and then you can also change the title because I see here I have registering signed statements.
Yes.
Well, it actually is you can think about better section headings, but here like the DS receives the signed statement using the API, and then it needs to register them, and then it produces the transparent statement. And so before registering them, there are a few steps in here. And I think it was Cedric or Antoine who then in the BR tightened up the should, may, must language. So that's good as well. Get to that. And if you scroll down, so after all these different steps are done, it's registered, and then in response, the issuer then gets the transparent statement kind of / receipt back. the transparent statement being the receipt and essentially the signed statements. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's obviously the pointers to all the other drafts is like the committer, for example. Okay. And that's, yeah, and move text around as you
Yeah,
can
why
see.
it is showing deleted on the left for line 750 is okay,
When
this.
when I move it, then it gets a little bit confused, and then you see this checklist. I just moved it up there
Yeah.
because I thought it would be it's the best place from a readability point of view.
Okay, makes sense actually. Yeah. Okay, so there is not really as such a huge amount of change. It's just
No,
that the
but it
GitHub
looks a
shows
little
it like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's just the way how the tool does it.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. So I think we should give people maybe 2 days for this review, or what do you want to
Well,
do, Johannes?
ideally not anymore because it has been out there for a long time already.
Yeah.
But I think since the beginning of August. So because it would be nice to then also fold in the changes that are described in the other document.
Yeah.
Which ideally we don't want to have too many merge conflicts over time.
So I see neither Cedric nor Hank has reviewed it. So maybe I request them to review it as well. At least the core contributors should review before we blanket merge.
Hank, Cedric, did you not look at this?
Only today, so it looks good. But I can formally have a read and click. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So Hank?
Then let maybe Hank. What about you?
Okay, I'm muting again. Hi, this is
Good.
Hank. No, I have not looked at this. As far as last week was half year ago, some IDs have been submitted. So there was a lot of expiration date last week for me. Sorry. So I had to switch gears a little bit. I'm now back on track with actual current IETF work, and this is on my list to be done on a business trip this week. So I will be back next week with review, and then we can move on to the issue and create new PRs. Also, probably PRs from Cedric and Antoine. And sorry for my voice; it's basically died.
Well, I wonder whether we should just merge it, and if you guys have some comments, you just put it on top of it and be done.
Can we do this on Wednesday? Again, Wednesday I will be in a train, and then I can really say yes or no, because I literally have not looked at it. So but 2 days, like every 48 hours, and then there should be something to we can.
Yeah, Hannes, let's set a cutoff date of Wednesday.
Yeah.
And
Perfect.
then let's wait for 48 hours for Cedric and Hank to revert back on this pull request. If by Wednesday we don't get enough response or enough reviews, then we will merge it as is.
Perfect. Let's jump to the other PR, which concerns the normative language.
Yeah. I had a slight issue with this. I think I remember I had reviewed this as well.
Yeah, but Cedric, did you do this one? Or was it Antoine?
So Antoine is working on that one, but it's still work
Okay.
in progress, and experimentally, every should trigger the controversial discussion.
Yeah, but it's a good big thanks to Antoine for touching this, because that was something I noticed when I was reading through the document, and he's now going through it and checking like what should we really have there. Like we can't sprinkle the shoulds all over the place, or maze. Need to be a little bit tighter on some aspects and maybe looser on others. And so
Well,
I think that's the thing.
I think it's super important, and I think it's a great way of going back to many issues where we picked should because we did not have an agreement on whether it was mandatory or not. So I think right now the should are reflecting the lack of consensus, and that's why it's actually
Yeah.
quite difficult. But we'll get there.
Exactly. And specifically, the should is sometimes a convenient way to get out of the tough question of whether something should be mandatory or not. I understand that. But for an implementer, if there are only shoulds in there, it gets really tough. Developers have a hard time then to figure out like when should they actually implement a certain functionality and when not, because they have a hard time making that judgment call. So it's good that we go through this exercise.
No, I completely agree. I guess one concern that came out in several of those discussions is that in some cases the decisions are not going to be made by the standard, but they are not going to be made by the users as well. So for a given instance of a blockchain of a supply chain, you may some things are going to that were optional are going to be made mandatory, and I think between what should be mandatory in the implementation and what should be mandatory in every deployment, we are there are difficult decisions to be made. So I think for example, some contents of the registration info would likely be mandatory in a given supply chain, but are not going to be mandatory for the SCITT architecture overall. And maybe we can have a preliminary discussion that explains that. And I think using should is a way to say most people who instantiate SCITT are going to require it, but some of them may opt out, and that's why it was should. Do you have a good suggestion on how to deal with that case, or just write a mail and let it?
I think it's a case by case thing.
I think I have a suggestion, like wherever it is not specific to a very SCITT architecture specific thing, we may say that this is left to a specific specific policy of implementation, or a specific kind of instantiation of SCITT implementation or something like that, we should say.
But
and then
isn't
we are
it
out
what
of
May
this,
says?
yes.
Should is to me that's very close to my interpretation of May, right?
Yes, but I think may, just keeping it may feels a bit ambiguous, because what are we trying to say? May means who does it. So we can give an example that these things may be a part of some policy decided by this SCITT owner, or maybe some implementations may decide it based on their use case, something like that. We can put a disclaimer or an additional clarification, I meant, with what we mean by may here. Otherwise it is just a may, right? Transfer service may provide a backend.
Yeah. May I ask again here, like obviously, like from the comments, Ori and I have provided reviews, and also, like as you can see on the screen, Ori made change proposals and so on. But Hank and you, Yogesh, and Antoine.
No, I have reviewed it as well.
You've reviewed that as well.
I have reviewed
What
some
about
part
the
of
others?
it, yes. I don't know about others. Yeah, I think it's mostly Hank has reviewed it, you have reviewed it, and Cedric has seen it as well, I'm sure.
Should we also give 2 days, 48 hours to get sort of the to try to close this, to see more reviews and see where we are?
I'm okay with that.
That's fair. I think that's fair. As to Cedric's comment, I think there's cases where, depending on the vertical or the use case, it changes from may to should. And trying to encode that is exactly what Cedric's asking the question is. How do we write that into the spec?
where we would say exactly that, right? Then maybe the answer is that it shouldn't use that type of normative language. It should actually explain that exactly what you just said.
So one way to deal with that would be to introduce a more explicit notion of configuration or profile, so that we can say that if it is mandated in the profile, then you must do it.
Right. It could be a profile, for example. You could punt it on that. You could also say it's
right now,
in some cases it may be a policy.
I know this process of picking the architecture and instantiating for a particular block supply chain, sorry, is it's not a step that is described anywhere, and that's probably you should probably be more explicit about that if you want to capture this this distinction.
Yeah. So where specifically do you want to sort of defer the issue to a profile, let's say?
Well, okay, so we could just use may in all those cases for now until we define explicitly what the profile or configuration is, and once we have once the profile exists, we can say we can refer to it to explain the profile may be configured to require it, in which case issuers must implement it.
I think we probably have to look at this specific.
We fix this. We are more explicit about the instantiation where we move from generic to a specific supply chain. It's going to be hard to do it, and so I would postpone that and possibly put may at least instead of should in those cases for the time being. But we should have a discussion with Antoine.
Yeah. But there's a risk.
He has the lock on that pull request. Yeah.
But Cedric, there's a risk. Like if you have all sorts of use cases in mind, and the whole document is just a may do this and that, then you can almost forget the may to begin with, right? Because then it's kind of a meaningless. There's no interoperability whatsoever. So I think that the first question to ask is, do you actually anticipate any level of interoperability with what's in this document?
I do, of course, but I think there are two levels of interoperability. There is interoperability between within a given supply chain, and then there is interoperability of code and services between different supply chains. And for the latter, I think it's harder to mandate every implementation to implement all the features that are going to be required in only a few supply chains. So that's the core difficulty that we have.
But maybe we need to pick on specific issues to actually see the point here. But maybe, yeah, if you go through this and see, well, like for example here, the specific case, like if I see Ori's comment, that looks to me like when we talk about DIDs, I think, for example, I would merge his commit.
So DID is a good example. So for example, I think one of the should that we are turning into a must is to require that all implementation must support the DID method, the DID web method. So now if I'm doing a supply chain and all my issuers are going to use X509 certificates, the fact that I have to provide an implementation that does a call out to get a DID manifest for DID web is a complication, and many people will object in putting the code base.
So here I have the solution. I would write in absence of a profile, the DID web method is mandatory to implement, because then someone can come along and write the profile and say, no, in my case, it's not the DID web method because of whatever supply chain. In there, it would be the DID key. method.
Actually, I like that, Hannes. We should write that in.
Yeah,
That-
actually, other
that's a good-
specifications do that too. If you, for example, look at the TLS specification, it has mandatory to implement ciphers there, and it explicitly says the statement that I just made.
Okay, I agree with your proposal, but not quite with what you are saying about TLS. In TLS, an implementation has to implement all the mandatory cipher suits, even if the profile is going to exclude them.
Let me look it
If
up.
I recall correctly, in TLS, you have to implement a couple of key exchange methods, even if you
No, you're wrong. You're wrong. So let me just look and post you the sentence.
Shall I stop sharing? You want to share, Hannes?
No, it's good. I just I pointed. I sent the link to the chat window to just precisely.
I'm curious, but I do agree with you. The only concern there is that it's putting more pressure on us defining a profile or a configuration, which we don't have yet.
No, we don't need to define the profile, right? We just say the semantics of a profile, and then what do you mean by we need to define the profile?
We could, of course,
if we say
define
you must,
profile.
No, if we say an implementation must implement something in the absence of a profile, I don't define what the profile looks like, then it's a bit vacuous, right?
We need to introduce profile in the kind of the envelope format.
Well, if someone
not in the envelope, it's to me the profile is global to the transparency service, not to the envelope.
But just look at when the DLS 103 when Ecker wrote the DLS 103 specification, like that's the link that I sent into the chat window. That's basically what you want. It says like those are the mandatory to implement sort of mechanisms, and then much later people came up with profiles. And so of course here, like for example, one profile would be one that tackles, let's say, Hank's famous seafood example, and who knows what people in the seafood industry would want to use in terms of algorithms. Maybe they don't like that did web method. I have no idea.
Okay, no, that's great. But where do they define the application profile?
Maybe
for
the content
DLS
type.
or for this? Cedric, are you asking?
What is an application profile for TLS?
I can send you another link.
Okay, maybe I missed that other RFC. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm expecting a review on that other document. I sent you. Here's an example. It actually says profile in the file name.
I see. Okay. So a profile is an RFC. It's not something that is defined in an RFC. Okay.
Well, there is a profile for.
No, there should be a profile field in the array. The parent spec should have a profile field somewhere, right? Because then it can refer to a specific profile.
No, it doesn't need to have an explicit field. It can be like a deployment-specific circumstance, like some community decides that they want to use Git in a specific way.
I see, but still doing.
But how does the interoperability happens, Hannes, in that case? Because if I don't have the profile,
the people who operate the services know how to use it.
But an important distinction is that TLS says you must have an application profile standard, not just a profile.
Yeah. Well,
so they require another RFC explicitly. Yes.
No, it doesn't say
IETF.
IETF.
That's not of an application profile standard specifying otherwise.
But it does, like standard. It doesn't say from which standards organization. It's a document, right? But you can change the language to say, like, for this specific case, it needs to have some profile, some specifications somewhere. It doesn't need to be. You can come up with a registry to to give people a chance to register in IANA different profiles, so it's easier to find.
Okay.
For example.
Okay, so what I will propose then is that we introduce the supply chain profile as something that is not defined yet, and then we use that that term to refer to the profile and to qualify some of the should that are that you are turning into must. Sorry.
You mean
Make
the
that
software
software
supply
supply-
chain?
Make that software supply chain. I'm okay with that, Cedric.
Yeah.
The hardware,
Why
hardware one may be a
software,
little bit different.
it will, any supply chain may want to have its profile, right? If you want to
I
do
agree,
hardware, you
but-
can also have a profile. I don't mind.
But some of the customs and border protections are going with verifiable identity, and they may change a little bit. So I'd like to keep them separate. It's like, I'm fine with software supply chain.
I don't see why we need to be so restrictive. Why not tolerate profiles for other supply chains?
Well, let's see your text first, and then we can argue about it. How is that? But don't put it into this PR, because that will confuse things even more, right? I think it would be good if we could complete this one and create another PR specifically with this profile idea. How does that sound?
I think one
So
should
in other
create a
words-
GitHub issue, I think, for adding profile there. So that we don't forget this. You should create a GitHub issue to address the profile part we discussed just now.
Like this PR is huge. Like you basically went through the whole document. It always causes problems with sort of making some progress on agreeing on the text.
But what we are looking here is local rewrites that where we can replace should by must. And I think a local rewrite that refers to the supply chain profile is good enough for this pull request. Otherwise, do we leave those should behind?
Well, I think it would be good if maybe someone like Hank could also do a review again of this one to see whether you are fine with this, Steve. Or should we switch topic and let this settle in a little?
As I said, Antoine is still working on that, so the pull request is not complete.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Steve, do you want to switch topic?
Yeah, but
Well, actually, we could, but I actually wasn't when I was popping in the queue. What I was going to suggest is this is one of the general things we hear as feedback of specs is when things say may or could or should, it gets very vague about what the implementation should be. So without specifics on that, that's must and should, clarifying will help.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I think it would be important to get this one finished.
yeah, but Antoine is again. Sorry, this is Hank. Antoine is still working on it, so it's not done yet, and we can't just merge it right now. It's also not fit for a 48-hour deadline. I think this is the next key item. So, and we can move to Steve's topic. I think that's fine.
Yeah. As I said, we agree on the goal there, but for many instances, what to do is controversial and needs a specific discussion still. Sorry.
Okay, we stop sharing now, Hannes, because I think Steve has a topic to share.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
I hope now you're not seeing my window.
No, you're cleared.
No, you're good.
But do I share? Oh, let's see. I forget how this works.
Yeah, you.
Let me share a specific. Yes. Oh, I see. Okay, this is where I can. I'm trying to remember how it. There we go. Okay. So there was two hack docs that we started hacking together to try to put some more context. So the identifiers is certainly a piece. I think the question is, if we roll all the way back, is what do we think the structure of a feed should be? Is it just a plain string? Is it a string with a dictionary associated with it? Or what are the use cases we're trying to get out of a feed? The identifiers is another interesting area that at least personally, I need to catch up on that whole thread. When we think about releasing artifacts, there's the concept of there's multiple versions of an artifact. And when you combine that, a couple of different dimensions of there's continuous versions. Versions aren't necessarily linear in the sense that every new build is a update to the previous one. There's the ability to have multiple supported versions of a particular product that you need to provide updates to, not just functionality updates and not just servicing for security or other reasons. So how do we think of that in the concept of a feed? What I did was I wrote this up a bit just to pull into the discussion, how do we want to structure a feed so that we can think about the various permutations of that. So this is rough. I was just trying to get this together. So it's a purpose of conversation. So how do we structure SCITT feeds? How to correlate previous versions? So if I'm trying to patch a particular version, how do you declare that? And is that, we'll come back to how much of this should be as part of a SCITT structure, or is it up to the application layer? And one of the topics we've been discussing is, do we have, an arbitrary sample project, or do we have a real world project that we could use as a reference? So I definitely want to have that conversation. What real world examples should we look at? For now, I've just used this NetWatcher sample, but we should definitely look at some existing ones. And Robin had shared some additional documents on various package managers, so I'll come to that document in a minute. So the idea here is that there's, just as an example, there's multiple versions that are currently in support. In this case, the NetWatcher version 1 supports on-premise networks, and just for the arguments, that the version 2 takes care of cloud-hosted networks, and they're not necessarily compatible, or the version 2 customers have to opt into paying for it, and so they're paying for version 1. They're not paying for version 2. They're expecting patching and servicing of version 1, while version 2 is adding its capabilities as well. And this is the point here that patching is never necessarily a linear concept. So that, version 1, and you can think about this as Git branching as well, is how somebody would be patching different versions. And in this case, our version 3 has started, and I've just showed the permutations as both Windows and Linux versions of this particular thing, but it could be Windows and Mac, it could be different processor architectures and so forth. The other thing is that we didn't necessarily want to build in the assumption of semantic versioning. So I've got the Cal version as I wanted to put that as an example as well. If you think about, a particular project, a project might have 1, 2, or 3, or 10 output build artifacts that need to be tracked, that need individual statements to be made for them. If there are 5 artifacts that come out of a build that need individual statements that being associated with them, but there's some logical grouping around those, and if there's an average of 5 builds a day that are being produced, not all of which will actually, if a build fails, for instance, you might skip that version and not put it on the SCITT feed. So if you notice here in the Windows one, I just happened to skip 1.0 into 1.3. Would, if we want to have a feed, have the ability to have associated statements around that artifact? Every time do I create yet another feed? So this is just some input to it to frame the conversation of how complex, artifacts that people are doing builds around, and how do we think we want to track them from a concept of a feed? Is a feed literally every time I do a build, there is just each one is its own feed, and I can put SBOMs and statements and vex and statements of quality and so forth to that one build? Or if I have a new version of that, can I put that new version on the same feed and have some kind of structure here? So I don't have an answer per se. I just wanted to bring up the concept of versioning to think about when we're structuring feeds, so that we could think about how does a user know how they can patch, or what new version should they consume. Because version 2 doesn't necessarily supersede version 1. As you can see in the picture here, that there's this branching of patches to a particular version. There's the other concept that, when version 1.0 is released, we don't know what the next version is going to be. So it's more a matter of a backwards pointer. So for instance, version 1. I'm assuming you guys can, when I highlight, you can see
Steve, you have a few hands up. You want to take those
Oh,
questions
sorry.
first?
Thank you. I can't see that. So I'll pause there. Go ahead. Let me go back over here.
Okay, so
Yeah, go ahead, Cedric.
I agree versions are interesting and something that we should discuss. I disagree that it should be part of the feed. So as far as I recall, in all the discussions of versions and timestamps and this kind of additional complex optional features, the prior decision was to put all of them as part of the registration info that provides a key value map. And so the idea was to have the issuer, and then the issuer picks a feed which is a simple name for the whole collection of transparent statements, and then use the registration info for all the details. And that may include versions, like semantic versions or secure version numbers, or timestamps, or anything else. But because these are going to be optional and hard to process, I don't think we should hardwire that into the feed. So my suggestion is to keep the feed as simple as it can, and to keep the registration info as the only header that provides the next function points where you may want to put versions or timestamps or anything else. Maybe a remark on top of that is that provided the feed is simple and atomic, and so it's the same for everything in the collection, then we have the registration info. You can also provide even more details on what to do with that in the payload, but then that's opaque, and that's another good possibility. So as an example, if I take your NetWatcher example, Steve, I think to me, the feed should be the name of the GitHub project, and the version should go into the registration info together, perhaps with the timestamp and other registration info information.
Yeah, and I want to get to Yogesh and Roy and Hank. So one of the things that I was thinking about is the piece that we have to kind of digest, and this is why I think some examples will help, is if it's fine to say we don't want it to be part of the feed, but if we say it's not part of the feed, what does it look like? So that was the thing that I was trying to digest, is if I have just a new feed for every build, is that more practical as well? So, and I was thinking of capturing this in the SCITT.io website. So it's not directly in the specs, and we could decide if we want to put it in the specs. But what does an example look like, and are we happy with that example? So it's not just say if we want to include it, but if we want to exclude it, what would a typical project look like?
So again, I really think that the feed should be a broad category of transparent statements, and if there are discriminant or versions or anything else, you should, for every build in particular, you should put that in the registration info, not in the feed. The feed should be for
Sorry, you should put that in the registration. Is that what you said?
In the registration information, yes, the header next to the feed,
okay.
but that is meant to be extensible. The feed isn't.
Shall I go next? Yeah. Two things I wanted to ask is, first fundamental thing is why this kind of relationship where this version is related to this. Can this relationship be not part of SCITT claim about the artifact? That this is the artifact, I am produced it, this is this version, this is linked to this version. So why it should be in a feed or other, but why can't it be a claim so that verifier can check
It could
that?
be. That's part of the question. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly the kind of question is I'm trying to take the discussion we've had to date around feeds and model out what would it actually look like, and do we like what it looks like? Because and it's map spec. This was Ori was bringing this up. Is what are the actual use cases we're trying to track?
Yeah.
So in the use cases, I added versioning as the latest thing.
Yeah. And second point is when you put the title on that, I got slightly confused because if you scroll back to your title, you said SCITT versioning, right? Is that what you said?
Oh yeah, sorry. It should be SCITT versioning or something like that. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
or something like
just the title of
SCITT
the
artifact versioning, or because I am producing new artifacts which are linked to my previous artifacts. How would I manage them? Because SCITT versioning means SCITT transparency service versioning or something. It felt like that. So thanks.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's it from me. Yeah.
The only
Right.
the original question I had for you was the SBOM already defines the title and the version semantics, and us not referencing it here seems kind of odd. And that its mechanisms needs to be taken into account, which kind of gets into a use case or a vertical. I understand what you're saying, and it also gets into questions of how do you guarantee only the owners of the product actually get to produce versions that show up on here, and how do you deal with moving between mergers and acquisitions? Those are all strong things. To my way, I always think of claims or endorsements to allow you to know which version you should migrate to or from. Because in the Windows case, it isn't just 6, it's probably 20, 100, 200 different versions that are shipping out there.
Right. That's kind of what I wasn't trying to get as complex as Windows, but there's certainly, you can imagine 2 and 3 versions that, companies maintain. And the Calver becomes an interesting one as well. And I think that's what you're bringing up is also is the question of, do we lean into SBOMs? Like, how much is SCITT dependent on a particular artifact type? You know what I mean by type? I mean, not just SBOMs or VEXs, but then is it SPDX or Cyclone DX or yet another thing? So I'm trying to figure out what is the right partitioning that we want to make as intrinsics.
Correct, which is why I had a hard time with trying to figure out feeds and the concept of a ledger versus it's part of the query and storage subsystem on top of it.
Yep.
Which is why I continue to struggle with feeds and their value here. I understand the feed concept when it comes to the policy with the configuration for what trusted roots are and what identity providers you support. When you start getting into the broader context of each use case or verticals, this becomes really, really hard all of a sudden.
So I see Hank and John, just from a time cop perspective, what do folks think about capturing some examples so that we can see, like, if somebody was implementing SCITT in general, not even specific to feeds, but if somebody was implementing SCITT for a particular software product, what could it look like? Or what does it look like for people that are already using it?
Sounds like a great idea.
Sorry. Hank, you're next.
I'm not sure if can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It doesn't show the indicator on my side again. So Meet Echo dropped the indicator, so I was not sure. Sorry. I tested in between. The noise was me. Yeah, on the top of the hour mostly. I think usage of feeds or they are not living in a vacuum. So now I was educated again that they exist below the issuer, and below the feeds is still the rec info map that can be arbitrary info, but it's also something like sequence number, but it's not arbitrary, I think. So I think what would help here really is a set of statements about software, like mock-ups SBOMs, mock-up CVEs, mock-up version updates of software, again, represented via SBOMs, I assume, and make a small graph of interrelated examples that are all standalone statements, but somehow related. And then find out from this set of, say, like, I don't know, 5 to 15 examples that are somehow interrelated, then try to figure out how to use the feeds for those. I think that might make sense. It's just a very embryonic proposal, but I think it would make this a relatively abstract discussion more tangible. And therefore, I think we can move on a little bit. And sorry for my voice.
Sorry, you're sick, Hannes. Hank. Hannes or John?
John is on.
Yeah, I'll be quick, but just to save people a lot of work in the coming week of thinking about this, it is a well-made and pretty unbreakable decision that we made a long time ago that SCITT is payload agnostic and doesn't look inside the payload to work out anything. And I think that informs an awful lot about what we can or can't do with vertical specific version format. So I think because the feed ID is a very important syntax to work out because it's shared between clients and relying parties and code, we need to have a syntax which is able to carry all of the use cases that we care to think of. But I don't think it should specify any of those use cases. So when we look at software versions and firmware versions and the subtleties of configuration versions, which are all legitimate and necessary parts of the software supply chain, we need to make sure that those can be expressed in whatever we come up with. But I think we should aim to be as generic as possible beyond that, and the application layer can work it out.
I think that's part of what I'm bringing up is by highlighting some of these examples, it may highlight that we need some generic structure in SCITT, but SCITT wouldn't be prescriptive in its implementation. But where would we put this information? Dick, you want to bring the last one at 9:02?
Yeah, Steve, I'll be very brief. Yeah, I think we showed a really good example during the hackathon when we showed that a vendor response file, which is really intended to support software supply chain artifacts, including SBOMs and VDRs and other information, I think is a really good example of the kind of information that people will be expecting if they want to conduct a risk assessment on software. Thanks.
Hannes, you want to bring us home?
Yeah, thank you, Steve, for sort of starting this discussion. So obviously we need to, it was the beginning or at least a continuation of what we had before. And we are not there yet, but we'll have to figure out on how to put sort of come to a conclusion on this feed discussion. That's important for the API design, but it's also important for the architecture document. So we need to find sort of a nice ground in between of what would work for all these different use cases, but it's still sort of descriptive enough that we can put something in the document. Good. John, anything else, or should we close now?
No, we're over time. We should close. Let's just yeah, hopefully we'll get those 48-hour deadlines done. We'll get a new clean version to work off, and then we'll pick back up on feeds and versions.
Yeah.
Next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, John, and thank everyone. And
thank you.
Thanks for the write-up. And hey, Ray.
Thank you. I managed to
Thank
miss
you.
most of the meeting, but I'm so sorry. Bye-bye.
Bye, Ray. Good to see you.